So what are some issues with this design? Well, there is something that some people don't like about this design. Whether it's a security flaw or not kind of depends on your philosophy, so let me know what you think. But one possible attack is something called domain enumeration. So let's say you go and request the IP address of nonexistent.google.com. And the response that comes back is a record saying there's nothing between map and 1. And there's a signature on that record that you can verify. But if you think about this from the perspective of the user has now learned something that they previously didn't know. When the user requested the IP address of nonexistent.google.com, they didn't necessarily know that map and 1 were valid subdomains, that there were actually websites living at map and 1. But the record that comes back reveals that there is something at map.google.com, and there is something at 1.google.com. So you could argue that this record has leaked information about existing domains to the user who previously didn't know about it. And if the user is clever, they could actually perform an attack that reveals all of the domains by trying to hit all of the different non-existent ranges. So for example, if a user asks for a.google.com, well, that falls in this range right here. So they'll get a record saying there's nothing between web and apps wrapping around as needed. So now the user has learned that web.google.com has something living there, and apps.google.com has something living there as well. And then maybe they'll request apps.a.google.com, the one right after apps in the alphabet, and they get a record saying there's nothing between apps and map. Now they've learned another non-existent domain. And then they can try asking for the IP address of map.a.google.com, the one immediately after map, and they learn that there's nothing between map and 1. And then they can ask for the IP address of 1a.google.com, learn that there's nothing between 1 and web. And since they've cycled all the way back to web, they have found all 4 of the valid subdomains of google.com. So with NSEC, a user with some patience can learn every single existing subdomain on a given domain. So is this a problem? Is this an attack? Is this not an attack? Some people will argue that it is an attack because you're allowing the user to learn information that they should not have learned. DNS is not supposed to let you learn all of these subdomains, but this is a vulnerability that NSEC introduces. That's one possible idea. Other people will argue that this isn't a security vulnerability, because if someone does learn that apps.google.com exists, if you wanted to keep it private, you should protect that website with a password or name it something that's not so vulnerable or that's OK to be leaked. So another counter-argument might be to say it's OK to leak domain names. You're not supposed to rely on domain names for security. If you really wanted something to be secure, you would protect it behind a password. You wouldn't just leave it at a domain that you hope people don't find. So both of those are valid arguments. Which one you like better is up to you. Some people say it's OK to leak domain names. Some people think it's not OK. That's up to your design. But NSEC as designed does allow domain enumeration.